These are the lecture notes for Chapter 9 on cellular respiration. So basically, cellular respiration is the process where living things break down organic molecules. Mostly it's in the form of glucose, and they break down those organic molecules such as glucose into carbon dioxide and water, and ATP is produced. So the chemical energy in food is transformed into the chemical energy of ATP. All right, so here we have cellular respiration and photosynthesis compared. What you have is photosynthesis occurring in plant cells, where sunlight is harvested by the plant cells and used to make food. And then that food, in the form of organic molecules, in the presence of oxygen, it is broken down by the cells of all living things. So if you notice, that's plant cells and animal cells carry out cellular respiration. And that occurs in the mitochondria. When the glucose is broken down in the presence of oxygen in the mitochondria of our cells, then carbon dioxide and water are formed as products, and ATP is produced in the process of that. So that's where we get our energy in the form of ATP. So photosynthesis and cellular respiration are compared on this slide here, and yeah, I can't highlight anything. I'm sorry. So, well, maybe, hold on. I don't think I'll be able to, but yeah, I will. Okay, look, I can highlight yellow. Okay, so that looks even better. So photosynthesis uses the reactants carbon dioxide and water, and the products it forms are the organic molecules, which we call food, and typically that is glucose and then oxygen gas. Cellular respiration uses the products of photosynthesis. So these processes are reverses of each other. They are the reverse of each other. Cellular respiration uses oxygen and organic molecules, typically glucose, to produce carbon dioxide and water. So the products of cellular respiration are the reactants of photosynthesis and vice versa. And another thing that happens in cellular respiration is that ATP is produced in the process, okay? Cellular respiration is a catabolic process, okay? So just make sure you know that. Cellular respiration is a catabolic process. So cellular respiration is a catabolic pathway. In other words, it's a breakdown pathway, and it's going to release energy. Okay, and we'll talk about the electron part of it later. Okay, so this is an exergonic type of reaction. Cellular respiration is exergonic, energy is released, and cellular respiration, when it is true cellular respiration, it's aerobic respiration. In other words, oxygen is required. So aerobic respiration is cellular respiration which consumes organic molecules in the presence of oxygen and produces ATP. All right, anaerobic respiration is similar, but oxygen is not involved. So in anaerobic respiration, it's going to be oxygen is not required. So compounds other than oxygen. Sorry. Let me try this again. So in anaerobic respiration, you're going to have breakdown of organic molecules, but not in the presence of oxygen. And you typically get less ATP from anaerobic respiration. Fermentation is a type of anaerobic respiration. It is a partial degradation or breakdown of sugars that occurs without oxygen. So fermentation is a type of anaerobic respiration. This is the overall equation for cellular respiration, the overall chemical equation. So make sure you're familiar with this. When we get to the next chapter, chapter 10 on photosynthesis, all you have to do is reverse this. But this equation means C6H12O6 is glucose. So it means glucose, 1 molecule of glucose, plus 6 molecules of oxygen gas, form 6 molecules of carbon dioxide gas, plus 6 molecules of water, plus energy in the form of ATP and heat. Some of the energy is given off as heat. Now, make sure also that you know that primarily the organic molecule that is used in cellular respiration is glucose, although our mitochondria can take other types of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, and convert them to products of cellular respiration. But primarily it's going to be glucose, and we're going to keep it simple and just use glucose as our reactant. Now, this is slide number 10, and I would watch this because this slide is an animation on oxidative phosphorylation, which is kind of hard to understand. Oxidative phosphorylation is how ATP is produced when it occurs through chemiosmosis and the electron transport chain. So make sure you watch that. It's slide number 10. Very important one to watch. Okay. Okay, we need to talk about a chemistry concept, and that is oxidation reduction reactions, or redox reactions. Both photosynthesis and cellular respiration are redox reactions. In a redox reaction, you have to remember, if you can remember oil rig, O-I-L-R-I-G. I can't really write on here, but, well, maybe I can. Let me try. I could highlight. Let me try. No, it's not. It's not going to let me like edit in this version. But anyway, oxidation is loss. That's what oil stands for. Oxidation is loss of electrons. Okay, so oil means oxidation is loss. Oxidation in chemistry means the loss of electrons. And then reduction is gain. Reduction, that sounds weird, I know, but R-I-G, rig, reduction is gain. So reduction is the addition of electrons, or the gain of electrons. That's what those terms mean. So let's talk about where it comes in. And this doesn't matter. I didn't really ask any questions about what's the reducing agent and what's the oxidizing agent. We don't have to go into all that, but okay, there's an animation on redox reactions. Watch it. Watch the animation. It's slide number 19. So the animation on redox reactions, but what I really want you to know about oxidation and reduction is how it relates to cellular respiration and photosynthesis. So during cellular respiration, glucose is oxidized. Okay, so during cellular respiration, glucose is oxidized. In other words, glucose loses electrons, and then oxygen oxygen gas is reduced, so it gains electrons. Now, okay, so here we go. This is what I need to show you. So if we look at glucose, glucose has 12 hydrogen atoms. Now, a hydrogen atom contains two particles. It contains one electron and one proton. Okay? So when we look at glucose, after it undergoes chemical change, it becomes carbon dioxide. In other words, it loses those 12 hydrogen atoms. So it also loses the electrons that were a part of those hydrogen atoms. So in other words, glucose loses electrons within those hydrogen atoms. Glucose becomes oxidized. Oxidation is loss. Then the oxygen gas, the other reactant, gains electrons in the form of those hydrogen atoms, and it becomes water. So we say that oxygen is reduced because it gains electrons. Reduction is gain. So go back and watch that slide number 19 on redox reactions to help you understand it a little better. But that's just something that in photosynthesis we'll have the same thing. We'll have oxidation and reduction, and you'll have to understand which reactant is oxidized and which is reduced. Okay, so glucose is oxidized, oxygen is reduced. All right, there are also a couple of substances, a couple of chemicals called coenzymes that are important in cellular respiration. One of them is NAD+. I'm trying to highlight the whole thing. Well, anyway, NAD+, you don't have to know the name of it. It's nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, but it's a coenzyme. So it's a coenzyme of cellular respiration. And the reason it's important is that during the different steps of cellular respiration, because there's 4 main stages of cellular respiration, NAD+ takes on a hydrogen atom and it becomes reduced. Okay, so NADH is the reduced form of NAD+, and the NADH molecule is used to make ATP. All right, so NADH is just a chemical that's used to make ATP. And then FADH2 is another one. I don't know if we have a slide on that or not. It doesn't look like it. But NADH and FADH2 are both coenzymes that are used to make ATP during the last step of cellular respiration called the electron transport chain. Okay, so an electron transport chain, which is step 4 of cellular respiration, consists of a series of molecules built into the membrane, the inside membrane of the mitochondria. And those molecules are going to pass the electron. The electron's going to move from molecule to molecule. I try to describe it as the game, if you've ever played the game Hot Potato when you're a kid, how the hot potato, you pass it from one person to the next, and of course it's going to cool off as you pass it down from person to person. So electrons are kind of like that. They move from molecule to molecule within the inner membrane of the mitochondria. They're passed from molecule to molecule, and the electron loses energy as it moves down that electron transport chain. So the movement of the electron is going to be used to generate ATP during the last step of cellular respiration. So basically how this works is that NADH, which contains hydrogen atoms, NADH passes the hydrogen atoms. It basically breaks down into electrons and hydrogen ions. So it passes those electrons to the electron transport chain. And then the hydrogen ions that are also produced, the energy from the electrons is used to pump the hydrogen ions across the mitochondrial membrane into or outside of the membrane. Okay, so after those electrons are passed down the electron transport chain, they have to go somewhere. You just can't have electrons, negatively charged particles, just floating around. So they have to go somewhere. They finally are accepted by oxygen. So oxygen is called the final electron acceptor. And this happens during the electron transport chain. The oxygen captures the electrons and the hydrogen ions that came from NADH and forms water. So we are going to go over this in more detail, but for right now, just remember NADH adds electrons and hydrogen ions, H+ ions, to the electron transport chain. But they eventually have to go somewhere. So the hydrogen ions and the electrons eventually join with oxygen and form water. And during the electron transport chain, the energy from the electrons and from the hydrogen ions is going to be used to make ATP, and we'll look at that in more detail. All right, so I'm just going to name the stages of cellular respiration, and then we'll come back and start with slide 32 in the next recording. So cellular respiration is broken down into, it says here 3 stages. I always teach it 4, but it's glycolysis, that's the first stage. And then I always teach pyruvate oxidation as one step, but here it's taught along with the citric acid cycle. So it's taught as like step 2 together. So there's the oxidation of pyruvate and the citric acid cycle would be step 2. And then step 3 would be oxidative phosphorylation, which occurs along with the electron transport chain. So what we're going to do in the next recording is break down these stages and understand how they all work together to generate ATP from glucose. But I want to say real quick, I don't know if it's in the notes or not because this is a new book to me. But we learned that cellular respiration is this chemical reaction. Let's go back to it. This is the chemical reaction, the overall chemical reaction for cellular respiration. That looks like one step. So why does cellular respiration, which is this one chemical reaction overall, have to be broken down into so many different chemical reactions? And the answer is because you make more ATP that way. Cellular respiration is more energy efficient when it's broken into the steps of glycolysis and citric acid cycle and oxidative phosphorylation. When it's broken up into many, many chemical steps, it's more energy efficient. You get more energy to be used by our cells that way than if this reaction just happened all in one step. It wouldn't produce as much energy or as much ATP that way.